Hello and welcome. I'm Brittany Elliott. I help mothers reconnect with themselves through self care so they can create a loving and fulfilling relationship with themselves. Thank you for being here. This podcast is all about simple, sustainable self care that will help you navigate your motherhood journey and thrive as a woman. We are all at different stages of our motherhood journey while overcoming different challenges along the way. And we are all women with passions, goals, gifts, and talents that didn't stop when our kids came into our lives. Motherhood is easy to get lost in, and it's a big change. Change is growth, and growth can be messy, exhausting, overwhelming, beautiful, and amazing. In each episode, I hope you find a healthy mix of inspiration, motivation, and accountability as you continue navigating your motherhood journey. This is what self-care looks like. Let's get into it. Hey everybody, welcome back to What Self-Care Looks Like. This is Brittany Elliott and we have a guest today. We are on with Stacey Herrera. Stacey, thank you so much for being here. I'm going to jump into your bio because I want to let listeners know all about you and what you do, and then we'll get into the nitty-gritty of some of these questions. So Stacey is an accomplished intimacy and relationship coach based in the vibrant city of Los Angeles. With over a decade of coaching experience, Stacey is a master at fostering deep connections and guiding individuals on their path to love and fulfillment. Communication is Stacey's superpower. She uses witty metaphors, clever analogies, and quirky comparisons to make the most complicated matters crystal clear. She effortlessly breaks down barriers and helps clients build strong, meaningful relationships. Stacey is more than your run-of-the-mill relationship coach. She's a quasi-sexpert, a connoisseur of carnal knowledge. She won't blush or stumble over taboo topics. With her everything is welcome here approach, she'll help you navigate the tumultuous terrain of physical intimacy. So welcome, Stacey.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm happy
You're
to be
so
here.
welcome. Can you tell our listeners, what exactly does it mean, the work that you do, to be an intimacy coach?
Well, let me just start by saying intimacy does not necessarily mean sex. And we often conflate the two and use them interchangeably, but they are not the same thing. Sometimes sex is intimate, but not always. And so intimacy is really about being close and connecting, like really sharing yourself and allowing other people to share with you. That can be physically, it can be emotionally, it can be experientially. There's a lot of ways to have intimacy. And because relationships are really the building block of our entire existence, we really need to do a better job at being in relationship. Of course, this is also the first time in human history that we've ever had the time and space to consider relationships or try to be good at them, because survival used to mean something different than it does now. But now that we have the time, you're seeing people, talking about their parental wounds and having a hard time with toxic behavior. There's a lot of talk about narcissism and all these different things that have always existed, but this is the first time in human history that we've really had the time, the space, and the awareness to actually, deal with some of this stuff. And relationships are the only path to fulfillment. It doesn't matter. Like, you can have a whole bunch of accomplishments and you could have a full bank account. Like, you could have a whole bunch of letters behind your name, but if your relationships are not solid, it won't mean nothing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that relationships are so important and people oftentimes do forget about them. And that's why social wellness is one of the pillars of Back to You in Five. Like, how well do you maintain the relationships that you have, create new ones, nurture the ones that you're in? And then within that, I feel like intimacy sometimes gets lost. What are the signs that intimacy is lacking in our relationships?
Probably one of the biggest signs is you feel alone even when you're not alone. You could be sitting right next to somebody and feel lonely as hell. So that's probably one of and I should add that we are living in the loneliest times also in human history. Part of that is because as much as technology has allowed us to connect, it has also allowed us to not realize that we're not actually connecting. So people are feeling very lonely, and coming on the heels of, the of COVID and the lockdown, I think that loneliness has come to the surface a lot more for a lot of people. So I would say loneliness is probably the one of the biggest signs that intimacy is not lacking. Not feeling supported, not feeling heard,
Mhm.
which, let me just add, sometimes not feeling heard looks like anger. Sometimes we get angry, but and this is true for a lot of women, we get angry, but I can tell you, one of my favorite relationship psychologists said this, and it rang true, is that an angry woman is a woman who doesn't feel heard.
Wow.
And that is a huge sign that intimacy is lacking in your life. And it doesn't have to necessarily be romantically. You could not be connecting with your friends, you could not be connecting with your parents or your family members. Like, it doesn't have to be romantic intimacy. The absence of intimacy it weakens relationships. And sometimes it might just be how it's always been. In a lot of families, it's like, oh no, we don't talk about that.
Mm.
We don't talk about Uncle so and so. Like, we don't talk about those things. Well, not talking about them means that you're not connecting and they're missing pieces. And sometimes when we experience, like, you ever met somebody and they seem so cool on the surface and you're like, there's something about them. Sometimes it's that they're not sharing their real self. And so you can feel the disconnect and you just can't put your finger on it.
Wow. And that there's so many places I want to go with that. But I've noticed a lot, especially with anger and times that I'm angry with anyone in my life, with any of the relationships I have. When I was younger, I'd really push that, on them. What did they do? Like, why would they do this to me and all of this? And now that I've gotten older, a lot of times if I'm feeling angry, I take a step back and I'm like, hold on, like, what's going on with me? Because I feel like I have to be connected with myself first at a good level to be able to really connect with others. So do you find that, like, in your work, that there sometimes is a self disconnection that's causing the disconnect
Hmm.
in relationships?
Yes, it is true. And I don't know that. It's kind of like with self-love. Self-love has been a hot topic for quite a while now. And a lot of people are like, if you don't love yourself, you can't love others. Well, that's not true. You can, you just won't be able to recognize whether they love you or not.
Mm.
So you can connect with other people. You just won't be able to tell whether you're connected or not if you're disconnected with yourself, because everything that we do, we view through the lens of our own inner experience, even if whether we realize it or not. And so if we are not aware of ourselves, then that means we can't be aware of how we're showing up in these other connections. If you're not aware of your inner stuff, it does look like they made you mad. Like, you know what I mean? Instead of like, oh, this happened and anger was my response. It's easy to look like everything is happening to you if you don't have self-awareness and you're not connected with yourself. I think self-awareness, like, if relationships are the building block of our lives, self-awareness is the building block of relationships. Like, you really do, because you can't be accountable if you're not self-aware. And well, you can't. There's a thing that I say. So you can't get to accountability if you can't self-reflect, and you can't self-reflect if you're not self-aware. So you have to be self-aware in order to reflect and be like, wait a minute, what part is mine to own? What was I saying? Like, okay, I know what they were doing, but how was I reacting? What was my language? And so you can't even hold yourself accountable. And accountability, again, another one of those really big things that is a very hot topic. But it's like, why can't they be accountable? Well, part of it is they probably aren't self-aware. They are completely oblivious. Just because you see it doesn't mean that they see it. And for some people, there is a it would literally break their brains if they were too much more self-aware. Like, there's a cognitive dissonance. For some people, it would cause them a lot of discomfort to actually see themselves completely. Like, those are narcissistic people. It's like they can't we want them to, but they cannot. Like there is it is isn't because they usually narcissistic people tend to be grandiose. It's not because they think so highly of themselves. It's because they actually don't. And their ego has told them a different story just so that they won't fall apart.
Wow.
Yeah, it's very
That
fast. The human mind
deep.
is fascinating.
That is deep. And that makes me think about relationships that will fail when the one person heals and the other party doesn't, because I think you grow into that self-awareness and then you see everything differently, and then you're like, well, this relationship isn't for me, this relationship isn't serving me, this relationship isn't working for either of us. And people will say like they were together 10 years, 15 years, and I don't know why a lot of times it's a woman, it's like she started working out and now she doesn't want to be with them. And it's like it's just the process of just reconnecting with yourself. And like you're saying, it makes sense because it just becomes kind of that mirror. So when it comes to intimacy in that way, like how can we be intentional about intimacy in our relationships?
Well, the of course the self-awareness piece is the most the probably the first step. But then you have to be willing to take the risk, because the thing about intimacy is you cannot get there without vulnerability. And that's where we resist. We're not resisting being intimate. We're resisting being vulnerable because it makes us feel exposed. It makes us feel unsteady, unsafe. And in order to bridge to get to the other side, though, you have to be willing to take the risk. It's like you can't look at the river and wonder what it's like on the other side if you're not willing to swim. You have to be able to risk being, or brave probably is a better word. You have to be able to brave being vulnerable, which, again, we shouldn't do it with everybody. We shouldn't do intimacy with everyone. It's not safe to do intimacy with everyone. That's we again, self-awareness. We have to be able to be discerning, because sometimes the hurt that we experience is because we don't have the self-awareness to discern whether or not it's a safe space to be intimate or to be vulnerable. And then it's like, oh, well, they hurt me. But usually it's like, oh, see, they had a red flag post plastered on their forehead. Like they weren't a safe space. But if you're not self-aware, you don't even know when something's not safe. It's like children are not self-aware. So it's like when you see them reach for the hot stove, it's not because they want to get burned. They don't have the self-awareness to be like, oh, the self-awareness for them comes after they've gotten burned. It's just like, oh, this is hot. And that's true for us in relationships too. So some of those relationships, well, all relationships serve us, every single one. It doesn't mean that they feel good, but relationships, like, we think that we've got this romanticized idea about relationships, or like you're just supposed to feel all warm and fuzzy. Relationships, the sole purpose is to heal. You cannot grow. It's the only path to healing. It's the only path to growth, because when would you see yourself otherwise? You
Yeah.
never would. So even the shit, can I swear?
Yeah.
Oh, even the shitty relationships are there. They serve us until they don't. They serve us to bring up the shit from the basement so that we can heal the stuff. And sometimes once it gets there, it's just like, this relationship has now expired, because now there's no more room for growth. And so, you evolve out of it. But if you're in it, it was for you.
Mm, yeah. That's
It doesn't mean it
so
was good.
good.
It doesn't mean it felt good. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean you don't have to feel good. Discomfort is part of the process, even in healthy relationships. And I should add, healthy relationships are harder than dysfunctional ones,
Mm,
because you cannot do healthy relationships on autopilot. You do not have to think about being in dysfunction. You know how to do it. You could do it without blinking. It's like driving from work to your home. It's like you don't even, the streets, you can get there without ever really paying attention. That's what it's like to be in a dysfunctional relationship. Healthy relationships, though, require you to do what you wouldn't normally do.
mm,
So if anger is your default, healthy requires you to pause before you run off at your mouth. You have to do what you
right.
wouldn't do. So they're much harder, and they require a lot of effort. It is not as easy as a rom-com in 90 minutes. That is not what it's like, because you can't ever stop either. It's like you don't ever get to a place where it's just like, oh, this relationship runs on autopilot. It doesn't. Not if you want it to stay healthy.
That was such a good way to explain what relationships are, because I was in preparation for our conversation. I was really, thinking about relationships and really reflecting on my own relationship with my husband. And by the time this airs, we'll be married 5 years. Our anniversary
Oh,
is this weekend.
congratulations.
Thank you. And yeah, I was reflecting on the statement of people saying, relationships are hard. And I don't necessarily think that they are hard or would say that, but I definitely would say that they are work. Just like life is
Yes.
work. In some parts,
Yes.
sometimes it's hard, and then sometimes it's a little bit, easier, but every time it's work, and every day I'm waking up and choosing him and all of
Yeah.
that. And I remember that at the beginning of not our relationship, but our daughter, when she was a baby, like an infant, for some time there into toddlerhood, like I was just so immersed in the mother daughter relationship that I wasn't like, I didn't have the capacity for like intimacy with him, or to even put in the work with the relationship. We were kind of just like moving around each other, just orbiting
Yeah.
around each other. And then, like, I remember the first time we went out, just the two of us, without her, like after, and this had been like a year. And we were like, hey, you, like, hey, I
Right?
like you, like it's good to be with you. And so, how do you work with people to be, I guess, more like cognizant of that happening in their relationships? Like if it starts to feel like autopilot, if you start to feel like y'all are just roommates, like how can you kind of right the ship when you feel like that drift?
Yeah, the effort. People wildly underestimate how children can ruin relationships. Nobody wants to say it because oh, you're supposed to. No, children are a devastating blow to relationships. They really are. It's just it it changes everything, and love has nothing to do with it. So a lot of people end up in relationships where they just start orbiting each other, and some people don't right the ship even after a year. Some people, it's like the kids go to college and you're like, well, who are you? That I haven't seen or relationshiped with now for nearly 20 years. You know what I mean? That's pretty common because, we pour all of our attention in our children, and it's really important for parents to nurture their relationship with their partner. Your children are going to be all right. The other part why it's important is because your children are learning how to relationship from watching you. So if you just orbited each other, they never see their parents kiss or hug or touch each other. They never see the door closed where they got to figure it out, get some cereal and be all right. Like if they never have to do those things, then they grow up to not know how to cultivate intimacy, and because they've never seen it. They're our audience. They do what we do. They don't really care about what we say. They do what we do. So it's really important to keep the connection going. It's actually the healthiest thing you can do for your child. And there is room, like the heart is vast. There's enough space for the kids, however many you got, and your partner. There's enough space, and your friends, and like there's enough room for all of it. But to get back to your original question, I think that to keep the intimacy going, if you are noticing because both people usually don't notice at the same time.
Mm,
Whoever notices is the one who has to take the leap and make a bid for connection. And sometimes that looks like saying, hey, I feel like we're a million miles apart.
mm,
Like I feel like we haven't really talked. Like we've been talking about like what we need from the store and what bills need to be paid, but I feel like we haven't talked about us. Yeah, I know what's going on at work for you because I know so and so was getting on your nerves, but how are you feeling? Like how are you? Like you have to take whoever notices, because and sometimes if we are being honest, usually it's the same person that notices every time, which then becomes the story. Why it always have to be me? Because you have greater awareness.
mm.
It isn't because, other person doesn't have any responsibility, but you have greater awareness. It's like, why should rich people pay more in taxes? Because they have more.
There it is.
that's all. And it's the same thing in relationships. The person, it's like, why should I pay all the time? Because you make more. It
Yes,
isn't, you know what I mean? That's all. Like, well, why should I be the one who does most of the cleaning? Because you're better at it.
girl.
Like we want this idea of like equality. No, we just want equity. Okay, I do most of the cleaning, you do most of the paying. That's all right.
Yeah.
You got
However
more.
it works for you, right?
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And that has nothing to do with genders. Sometimes it's, looks different than what we've been told. So it's whoever has the greatest capacity is the one who initiates. So if you're the one who notices, hey, we haven't had sex in 6 months. If you're the
Right.
one who notices, then you have to be the one to initiate the hard conversation.
Yeah. And I think with that, the self awareness comes back into play too, because let's say you're not the person who's noticing and someone's
Mhm.
noticing it for you, you can't take offense to that. Like, if the facts are the facts, like that with sex, if it has been six
Yes.
months and your partner comes to you and says, hey, it's like been 6 months, you getting upset about the fact that they're bringing it up and ignoring it being a fact is not helping, right? If it
No.
makes you and that's where the vulnerability, I think, comes in, that you're talking about. It's being able to be open and talking about it, and then looking inward, and it's like, whoa, has it been 6 months? Like, whoa, 6 months went
Yeah.
went by quickly. And I
Fast.
think people don't, there's just so much work. Like, there is so much effort that has to go into
Yep.
it. And it's way easier to just be like, no, it has not been. Or you're
Mhm.
just being
Well, and
extra.
the defense is the sign that it makes them vulnerable to even be called out on it. Like,
Mm,
anger is a secondary emotion. It's covering up the real stuff. So like a lot of the time when we get defensive, it's because truth just got walked in the room and we didn't know what to do. Like, what? What you mean? Girl,
ooh.
we would just wait. It was, yeah, it was just no. Was that 6 months ago? Damn. Like, you know what I mean? Like, but our defensiveness comes as a protector. It's just like, oh, we're just shielding ourselves from having to be honest about what's
Mhm.
really going on. And the reason is because we have also been conditioned to feel shame about doing something wrong. And so if you're coming to me and say we haven't had sex in 6 months and I'm defensive, then inside it's just, well, what's wrong with me that I'm not trying? Like, it's not that I don't find her attractive. What's wrong with
Mhm.
me that, like, what's wrong? Am I not man enough? You know what I mean? Like, all of these things, all of this societal conditioning comes into play. And so instead of just admitting that, because it's like, when you like, say it's an argument and the other person is wrong, it's like, well, why are they loud and wrong? Now you slamming doors and you doing all this stuff. Well, it's because people don't know how to differentiate between I did something wrong and I am wrong. I did
Mm,
something bad and I am bad. So
right.
once shame enters the scene, it cuts off all communication, because shame will grab your throat and choke you out before it lets you speak, because
Mm,
speaking about it is the remedy. Like, once you talk about it, it's just like, wow, you know, it made me feel small realizing that we haven't been sexual in 6 months, because I really like it and I didn't even realize I was missing it. And it made me feel small. It made me feel like less of a person. It's that
yeah.
vulnerability that makes it hard. But then once you tell it, and once you even say the thing that makes you feel really scared and quake on the inside, that there's intimacy.
Yeah. That is so true. And I've been asking, because relationships, right? It's all relationships. And a lot of times we will have more intimacy and vulnerability with like our besties, with our best friend
Mhm.
group. And I've always asked women who come to me with things going on in their relationship, or this person made me mad, their spouse made them mad. And I say, do you give your spouse the same grace that you give your best friend? And a lot of times we don't, but we expect more from our spouse than we do from our best friend. We put more on our spouse once we get to that stage in our relationship than we put on our best friend. But if our best friend came to us during brunch, it was like, girl, I know y'all two ain't even had sex in 6 months. we wouldn't be like, we would just be he talking about it and
Mhm.
really getting into why and what's been going on, like that. There would be no
Yeah.
hesitation. But then when the person with whom this is with, they say something, you're right, it becomes, shameful. And so I always want people to really like reflect on, what is vulnerability, like how can we do this work. So do you have ways for people to really tap into their vulnerability and almost improve their self-awareness?
I think, well, my go-to tactic for self-awareness is meditation, but that's not everybody's ministry. But, cuz meditation, like, the a lot of times people avoid meditation because they think, "Oh, I'm supposed to sit still and make my head go blank." Well, that's not really, no one does that. Really,
Hmm.
you just have to notice when you're thinking. Like, that's the thing. You notice when you're thinking, and once you notice that you're thinking, then you come back to your breath. Well, what you find is when you're not meditating, like, you notice when you wanna cause some chaos in your relationship. Like, for me, I have always been a talker and a little hot-headed, like, it's in my DNA, and I used to fly off the handle, and eventually, at first, it was just like, by the time I noticed, I done already did it. Now I got to apologize because I done already made the mess, right? Then it got to the point where it was just like I would notice that right while I was doing it, but I would still do it anyway. Then I would notice right before, and I would still do it anyway. Then I noticed that I wanted to. It's like, oh, things are going well. I notice I want to make a mess, cause some chaos, cause some dysfunction, start some shit up, right? Then I noticed myself noticing. So now I don't do that anymore. I don't have to cause chaos. I notice, like, I don't even remember the last time I felt like it because I'm so far removed now because my self awareness is so great that sometimes it's just like, oh, I'm feeling sad. Whereas before, that feeling, because it feels vulnerable, might have caused me to pick at somebody else,
Right.
to turn the attention away from myself. So meditation, I highly recommend it because that's just one of the benefits. But if meditation isn't your thing, journaling is good. You don't even have to journal about just morning pages, like just one page. You don't have to even do three. One page of just a brain dump to be able to see where you are. And if you can't see yourself, and this will tie in vulnerability and self-awareness. If you can't do any of those things, ask someone else, what have you noticed about me? And if you're asking the question, then you've already created room. If you're asking, that means you're prepared to hear what they have to say. But
Yeah.
sometimes you need someone else at first. Like, what have you noticed about me? Is there anything different about me lately? What have you noticed about my mood? Of course, the safest place to do that for most people is in their well, that's not true. The safest place for men is in their romantic relationships.
Mm,
Women do not require, well, as much as we do put a lot on our romantic partners, there is no other relationship where you expect them to be all of the things, right? No other relationship where that's expected. However, women have the luxury of having friends that we are vulnerable and intimate with.
right.
We are groomed and conditioned to be able to talk to our friends. Men do not have that. They can't be going up to their homie and be like, hey man, we haven't had sex in 6 months, and it's really just because things are going left at work, and I'm feeling a little emasculated because my boss is on my neck. Like, no, but he's not doing that. But men actually require more emotional labor in their relationships because they don't have space for that in their friendships. Whereas women, we have it in our friendships. It's just like there's certain things you're gonna tell your girlfriend that you're not talking to your husband about because you already know he ain't gonna get it, so you're not even gonna be bothered with it. But men don't have that. So you hear a lot of men, and anybody who's listening that is currently dating, they might see a lot of men might say stuff on their profile, the ones who willing, I'm looking for my best friend. Women almost never say that.
Mm.
Women are almost never looking for their best friend and their partner. They might, once they've been together for a long time, they might say, oh, we're best friends. But most of the time, women are not looking for that. Like the first time I heard my partner say that, I was like, oh, that is so sweet. Because I was thinking, that's you my man. You're not my best friend. Like
Right.
like we've been together for several years. So he is one of my best friends, but that wasn't a thought for me because that is not what I needed that relationship for. But because men don't have the spaces that we have, they often rely on the emotional container of the romantic relationship. And so for a man to, men are a lot more vulnerable than they think they are in their romantic partnerships because the stuff that they do tell you, they ain't telling nobody else.
Mm. Yeah. And that's important to recognize, like, for our listeners, because there are differences. There just are differences
They are.
in how we operate. And I think that with men, I think people ignore a lot of the things, that the pressure that gets put on men in society as well. We talk about societal pressures from women a lot, but men have those too. And a lot of times they're like heavy hitters. Even maybe we
Mhm.
have more
Mhm.
pressures, but the ones that they have are heavy hitters. And so they are carrying a lot too. And I feel like it'll take a lot more to push them down, through words than from women, because women maybe are a little bit more resilient than men in some ways. Um, so when it comes to partnerships and communication, what is the best way to get your partner to open up to you, or to open up the communication lines just both ways, just speaking with your partner?
Um, I think that, it depends on the guy. It depends on the guy. But if let's say it's something that a hard conversation that you need to have. Maybe you've been holding on to something or something's been bothering you and you haven't said it and you want to talk about it. The best approach is to not blindside them. Don't just come out blurting it out, especially if it's something that you've been thinking about, because it could take them by surprise. So the best thing to do is to say, like, hey, there's something I'd like to talk to you about. It might be uncomfortable. Is this a good time?
Mm,
Because then they can say, no. Maybe maybe they had something that they haven't been talking to you about. Maybe it was the worst day at work ever. Maybe they just sat in traffic 2 hours. You know what I mean? Like, is it a good time? Because then it prepares them. They get the option of saying, like, no, can we talk about it tomorrow? Or yeah. So, so now you've already prepped them. This is going to be uncomfortable. They
mm,
didn't get blindsided. They just said yes, and follow it up with, are you sure? If they say yes right away, are you sure? And then have the conversation. Again, make sure that you are owning your side of the street. Don't come with that. You always, you never. Those words should never be used in relationships. You always, you never. But you could just be like, hey, like, I noticed that we just haven't been connecting. Like, we've been right next to each other and we've been doing the same things, but it hasn't felt like connection for me. And I know that you're trying. I know that you got a lot going on at work, but can we add some cuddle time? I just need to feel like we're in this together. I just need to be held by you. It's not enough to just sit next to each other when we're watching Netflix. It's not enough for you to grab my hand because you're not always present when you do that. Sometimes it's just something
mhm,
that's so automatic because we've been together for so long. But can we just have some time, some skin on skin time, so that we can be reminded that we're here for each other? Or whatever the thing is, cuddle time is a thing that my partner and I do. It's
mhm,
that's a really great way to reconnect. Like, all your clothes need to be off and also, look, this is also for men. Having time that is about cuddling with no clothes on also helps them to not equate nakedness and nudity with sex, because nudity is not innately sexual. And
Mm,
sometimes those of us who identify as women, sometimes that's not what we're looking for. We just want to be close.
right?
You know what I mean? So if it becomes a habit and something that you do, then it won't be this automatic thing. Because sometimes it's just like, no, I really do just want to be held. But the reason we got our clothes off is because, especially if there's been a feeling of one of us has been feeling disconnected, then having no things between us, including
Mm,
our clothes, helps us to reconnect, because our skin is our largest organ. And when we touch each other, we are not only are we building our joint immune system, but we're also creating an opportunity for all those wonderful feel good hormones, dopamine, oxytocin, and all those things to come to the surface. So then we actually feel better. And incidentally, people that have more physical intimacy, not necessarily sexual, have stronger immune systems. So there's that too.
what?
Yes,
Huh. I did not know that. So that is
it
good to
is.
know.
It
And
is true.
that is very, I love how, you come to your partner, because I think a lot of times what happens is we almost forget, like, who our partner is to us. Like when we get
Hmm.
down, we start to, like, when we start getting picky, maybe we start getting a little disrespectful. It starts to get a little mundane, and you're doing that drift, and you just forget how important this person is to you. You just forget because you're disconnected, and you would never, under normal circumstances, treat someone who's that important to you in this way. You would never want to blindside them, right? You would want to have a
Hmm.
conversation where both parties are present. And I know for me, it's like if it's a little much, like I'll write it out. Like, hey, let me write
Hmm.
it out, because I'll get so caught up, like my body will start getting hot, just waiting
Yes,
for a
yes,
reaction that
yes.
I probably won't even get. I'm like, let me
Yeah.
write it down. Let me have you read it. And I will say, for listeners, I'm fortunate that in my relationship, we've been together in total for 7 years. I don't think we've ever had an argument before in
Hmm.
our relationship. We've definitely had disagreements and things we've had to work through, and we've always worked through them. So when people are like, what do you do when y'all argue? I'm always like, we don't. However, I have been in relationships where there have been arguments
Yes.
and
Yeah.
turmoil, but I remember how I was also. So I tell people, like, I've kissed a lot of frogs and I've been the frog before,
Yep.
and like
Yes.
that's just, but not every person is there. They're still trying to figure um things out. And I do think that we are in a season, at least that I'm noticing, that people are like, I'm ready to get into a relationship. I'm looking for a new relationship. I'm looking for something specific. So, what would you say what self intimacy work needs to be done before you start to pursue a new relationship?
Okay, first, I want to celebrate you and your husband for recognizing the difference between an argument and a disagreement. That is huge. Disagreements are fine and actually are important, but a lot of times we don't necessarily differentiate between an argument and a disagreement. And, like I was talking to someone and she was saying she had a relationship that ended and she was like, it was great. We never argued, and I said, "Did you ever disagree?" "No, not really." And I said, "That just means someone wasn't telling the truth.
Mm,
It doesn't mean you guys were in a great relationship. Somebody was lying."
yes.
Because nobody agrees with everyone about everything all the time. So I celebrate you for that. But back to the if you're ready to be in a relationship, I think that the most important part, because often when we get ready to date, we always are thinking about what we want someone to be for us. And the self intimacy is, what do you want to be for someone else? What are
Mm,
you offering? What are you bringing to the table? And not just, oh, well, I got my own house or I got my own whatever. Because in a relationship, the most important thing is us, not me, not I, us. And we forget that, especially, here in America where independence is like the catchphrase. We
right.
done independenced ourselves into this shithole we got going on over here. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like people don't know how you need to be focusing on us and we. And so if you are currently a single and you want to be a couple with somebody eventually, you need to be thinking about what does being an us mean to you and what do you want to offer to someone else? Like, do you want to be a safe space for someone? You want the person to feel like they're at home when they're in your company, and also you want to be loving because you can be loving while you're disagreeing. Like that prevents me from saying awful things to my partner. That is like, I can't take it back. Like I like to look at relationships like a stock pot. We're making soup, right? And anybody who can boil water, you don't even have to know how to cook. Anybody who can boil water knows what happened if you put too much salt in there.
Mm.
So you want to come with your stanky attitude and all of the you should have you always you nevers, you want to do all of that. You putting it in there. Well, you in the pot too. And
Oof.
if you put too much salt, ain't nothing you could do. You could keep adding water, ain't nothing you could do. You got to pour it out. Too much salt gets in there, ain't nothing you could do. I
Yeah.
mean, same things with too much sugar, So if you're not being honest and you just pouring sugar on everything, too much sugar will mess up a recipe too. So, you have to be mindful of what you're adding. So before you get an attitude, do I really want to add this ingredient to our pot?
Mm.
Instead, like, is it, I'd love to I have something to talk about. Something's been bothering me. Is now a good time? You don't want to blindside them because their nervous system impacts your nervous system.
Oof.
They get anxious. Guess what happens to you? Your stomach is hurting. You know what I mean? Like, because you're in this container, you're both in it. And so don't do something to someone else that you don't want done to you. The golden rule is golden for a reason. Would you, if he came at you like that, would that be okay for you? If the answer is no, then don't do that. I always ask myself, am I being loving? Is what I'm about to say loving? If so, how can I rephrase this so that it is loving, even if it's something that is going to be hard to hear? How can I package it so that it's coming from a loving place? And if I'm mad at you, I love you, and I'm
Right.
and I'm not okay right now. I need some space right now. I can't talk about it because I'm afraid that I might not use the right words. So can we take 5? I'm such a fan of pauses. Like, please pause. Take the beat. If you need to walk out the room, walk around the block, whatever you need to do so that you can have a loving conversation, then do that. But
Yeah.
also, if you're not in a relationship yet, you know these things about yourself. Look at your last relationship. What do you need to own from your last relationship so that you don't bring it into the next one?
Yeah, that's such a good point from last relationships because I always say I don't want to be flawless. I want to be aware of my flaws so that I
Mhm.
can self correct or use the words that I need. Like, it's like I want to be loving. If I don't think the words are going to come out right, I'll start with, "Hey, I want to talk. I don't know if this is going to come out right, but this is all love."
Yes. Well, and
And then
that
that
just a
person can take it.
disclaimer is huge. Cuz then
Yeah.
the other person they already know that you're still trying to figure it out, and then they can give you grace. Like, we have to bring our humanity instead of our representatives to every conversation. Like, bring your humanity. Humanity is flawed. Perfection is not the thing. Practice makes better. You don't need to be perfect. But
Mm.
if you bring your humanity in the forefront, that means your ego cannot be driving the car.
Oof.
It could be in the back seat. It's necessary. We don't want to get rid of the ego because sometimes when you need to be out there with your hey girl, hey, because somebody acting up, you want your ego on board. But when in intimate relationships, your ego doesn't. It has to be in the back seat. Because our ego is really like not our wounded child. It's our adaptive child. It's the kid that wounded child grew into. That's who we show up as when we acting up.
Mm.
It's not the kid that got abandoned at 7. It's the 10-year-old or the 15-year-old that came after that now is armored up. That's who we show up as when
Wow.
we're at our worst. That's where we go. We show up as this dysfunctional teen who think they know everything and haven't lived enough. We want to make sure that part of ourselves knows that our adult self got our look. You all right? And it's great. Your concerns are duly noted. sit in the back seat, I'm driving, and I'm gonna get us where we going safely. You
Oh.
know, because that's the part of us, like my adaptive child is well, my wounds, I have some mother wounds and some father wounds. And my adaptive child is, she is loud, she is a know-it-all, she thinks she know everything. She will nut up in a minute. Like like she gets loud when she doesn't feel her, like she not shrinking ever. She gets really big and puffy. And like my partner is not that person.
Mm.
So I have to temper her, that it's just like, girl, slow your roll. You all right? We all right. It's gonna be all right.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's that, but I have to take a pause sometimes. And I'm huge at like, let's figure it out right now. But I have learned that sometimes I'm not in the place to work through something. That sometimes I have to say like, hey, I need a minute. And my agreement with my partner is we're not going to take longer than 24 hours, because one of us, whoever asked for the pause or the break, is going to the other person is going to get anxious if it goes longer than 24 hours. And the difference between just stonewalling, you don't just stop talking, you tell them that you need the break.
Right.
That's the
Right.
loving thing to do. Like, hey, I don't have the language to really clearly express myself, and my emotions are all over the place. I'm not sure that I would do either of us any good talking about it today. Can we get back to it tomorrow?
Yeah.
The last major disagreement my partner and I had, we thankfully we both are in therapy, and I had therapy that day. He had therapy the next morning, and but we neither of us slept well because we were bothered, and we slept with each other. But we didn't sleep well, and so by the time he got out of therapy, he called me and he was like, "Hey, I really do want to talk about it, but I'm sleepy and I'm tired. Can we please, just hold it over until tomorrow?" And I was like, "Sure." So he came home. We had our regular evening. We ate, we watched TV or whatever. We went to bed. The next morning, we got up. He made coffee. I had tea, and he was like, "Okay, I'm ready to talk now." And it was great. And it
Yeah.
wasn't like, now my 25-year-old self would have been like, "Oh, if we not talking now, we ain't talking."
Mm.
You know what I mean? But now again, that was my adaptive self that gets anxious when something is not resolved quickly. And now I'm just like, "No, the pause. Please embrace the pause. It's completely okay. Let's
Yes.
let's wait. If it means that we're going to be kinder and gentler and offer more grace to ourselves and each other, then let's talk about it tomorrow."
Yeah, that's so good, especially for listeners, because we will fall into this bad habit of then antagonizing that person, right? They say they need a break. I need a break before I say something that's not nice. We'll go ahead and say
Mhm.
it then. No,
Yep.
don't no, we don't go ahead and say it then. No, go ahead and take the break. I respect the pause. So I definitely have taken
Yes.
that away from this. Respecting the pause, putting effort in, self awareness is important, and understanding that your relationship is a recipe. It is that pot of soup. Like, what
Yeah.
do you want in this? Like, what do you want to be a part of this? And there are so many things, right? We are so many things that make up this really great meal. And how hardy do
Mhm.
you want it to be? And
Exactly.
it's gone. We gotta get it in there if it's gonna be hardy.
Yes.
So really, I love the way that you speak about intimacy. I love how real it is, and it's so relatable, and it helps you being able to see the flaws within yourself and be able to
Mhm.
recognize what's going on with your partner, but not in a way that makes you feel any sort of disdain. Like, no one is going to be
Exactly.
perfect. We have to accept ourselves and we have to accept others. And I especially feel like with parents, for parents with children, like to me, it makes me a better parent as well,
Mhm.
because me being a mother is my relationship to my daughter. And so how am I doing that? How am I giving her space? How am I teaching her to be? And so all of that is important. So for the people who are getting into new relationships, I would say be mindful of that. When you're in relationships, be mindful of that. All of you need to check out Stacey. So please tell everyone where they can find you.
I am not on social media. I have profiles, but I'm not active on social media. So, but my website, staceyherrera.com, I have a newsletter. I also have a Substack called sexinreallife.com, and where I talk about like sex as a grown person and all of the things. It's not like porn. It's sometimes it means making adjustments and doing things differently and renegotiating what we think sex is. So all those things. Something you just said I want to just add. I know this we're at the end about self-acceptance. The more accepting you are of yourself, the easier it is to accept other people. If we treat ourselves like unconditional friendliness with ourselves, everything is welcome without making any parts of us wrong. It's so much easier to accept other people and their flaws. Like I can be really judgy, and for years I used to say I'm working on my judgment, and I stopped saying that. Now I just accept, oh, yeah, I'm judgy. And guess what? I judge less now because there's no part of me that's making myself wrong for when I do judge. So now that's not as big of a thing. Is that it's just like, no, yeah, that's a personality quality that I have. Yep, I totally do that. I got opinions, and my opinions got opinions. And that's okay. I accept it all. And now I judge less, and it gives me allows me to give other people, like I have bountiful volumes of grace to dole out to others because I give myself so much grace. Like there is no part of you that's wrong or needs to change. There are parts that are going to evolve, but there is no shadow without the light. So why we got to make the shadow go away? Ain't no shadow with no light. You ain't never seen a shadow when the sun wasn't out.
Mm.
So if the shadow requires the light, that means that even our darkest parts, the light is still there. So it's okay. Accept everything, and it makes it that much easier to accept other people.
Well, that is beautiful. And on that note, thank you so much for being here. This was great. Listeners, make sure you go through this one again and take some notes. I know I am going to. And I'll talk to y'all all very, very soon. Thank you for listening to What Self-Care Looks Like. Again, I am Brittany Elliott, a self-care and mom life management coach. I help working moms change their approach to motherhood so they can feel vibrant, empowered, and fulfilled in their motherhood journey. My group coaching program, Reconnect, is built around the 5 wellness pillars that will help you feel the most whole as you balance your motherhood role with your personal needs. So be sure to check in with yourself using the free wellness quiz at backtoyouin5.com/quiz.